This is Modern Gaming Club. This series will attempt to highlight the phenomenon of PC, console, and mobile gaming and bring to light all of its phenomenal aspects. Let's take a dive together into the world of modern gaming and take apart its structure. Now, here's your host, Rotimi Osagi. All right, this is Modern Gaming Culture. This is episode 30. Modern Gaming Culture episode will be the official partnering of Modern Gaming Culture with my Pokemon content, exclusive Pokemon content. So this is going to be episode one of what will probably be 6 episodes of deck profiles for this format. This is G Block and on. So Scarlet and Violet base set and the most legal tournament set is Phantasmal Flames. And so it'll be for Scar and Violet, so Phantasmal Flames. And yesterday, um, Ascended Heroes just dropped. And then in 2 weeks, it'll be tournament legal. But this will be for up to Phantasmal Flames. All right, so it's going to be episode one of what's probably going to be a 6-part series. So we're going to be taking a break from what I've been laying out, right, and unpacking. And we're going to, the last episode was basically like a filler episode 2, sort of just like settling in the audience for what will now be this 6-part series. Hopefully I can just do them all 6, right? And so pretty much sorted out my product uh discrepancies, if you will. So I've been saying how, it's like waking up and realizing you have to open, 10 times as much product, right? Which can seem strange if you're not, immersed in gaming, right? Generally when people are just generally, they don't have a hobby as, novel and budding as, what modern gaming has turned into, right? Um, you can seem very sheltered from sort of society in general, right? You get all these issues that people like to talk about, antisocial, you know, um, withdrawn, being ostracized, feeling, very like an outcast, despite social standing, etc. Right? And so um, it's not something where you can generally relate to sort of that sort of circumstance when it comes to gaming culture, right? Because, again, with gaming, right, it's very spontaneous, right? You can go from being a zero to a hero overnight, right? And so with gaming, we have to have respect to that in all ways, right? Even though we understand that when it comes to reaching people in society, we have to sort of reach them, from a very empathetic perspective. So, you may not have that spontaneity in your life, but we still have to be empathetic with society, right? Generally, again, you can go from being, nobody, to being the biggest thing sliced bread, right, overnight. And so with gamer culture is the same, right? And so, I've been going on about how, oh, it's like waking up and realizing, um, you have to your expenses have increased tenfold, right? And so um I've pretty much sorted that out, right? And so um, don't want to disclose too much with respect to that, but um, so I'm ready to do the deck profile series, right? And so I'm gonna start off with Kangaskhan. I already have laid out here, right? So the series I've been teasing for about a month or so, um, and you know, I was really looking forward to doing it, right? Because I was looking forward to doing it in sort of the style that I did it um, originally when I did the expose series, right? You can check out on YouTube. I think I posted on Rumble too. I don't post on Rumble too much anymore, but I also posted it here on TikTok as well. And that series, yeah, the episodes were all like an hour a piece, right? But those were very expensive, and I was also really trying to lay out a lot more than just kind of just looking at the format, right, etc. Right, and so um, I'm gonna try to keep them under an hour, right, just for the sake of TikTok, right? And so um, and if you see me looking down, it's because I have like a hand on my desk. So I'm kind of just shifting through the cards while I'm talking here. And so yeah, but this time around for this dick profile series, right? It's gonna be sort of like expose style, right? But this time I'm gonna lay out sort of how I think the format would unfold, right? With respect to kind of what's meta, right? And what's coming in and what's coming out, right? With rotation coming up in a couple months, right? And so yeah, with respect to sort of how the format would unfold, I'm going to lay out a deck profile series. So I'm projecting 6 episodes, and it's probably going to be 6 episodes. And so I have all the decks that I'd want to sort of overview, right? And so um, yeah, we're gonna have a lot of fun with this. It's gonna be very enjoyable. So you sit back, relax, get comfortable. It's gonna be very interesting and very enjoyable. Um, and so um, yeah, I have lists, so I'm gonna be building all the lists out. So the first list I have is Kangaskhan. I have it built out in front of me. So we're gonna do 2 angles here. So let's just go through the angles so that people are ready. For people who are going to be listening and watching. So that transitions well. So this will be the angle sort of similar to when I did the expose series. So this is going to be a second angle that I'm going to be using. And then also I'm just going to have the shot of me going through Pokemon TCG Live. And those will be the 2 angles, right? So if you're familiar with my deck profile series, those series were pretty well received when I first dropped them. And they kind of just mixed in, to talk a little bit about, AI, right? Um, they were kind of mixed in with the, algorithm at the time, right? And so they mixed in very well. And so they were very well received, I feel. And so, um, this time around, it's going to be interspersed with basically, whoever's been pretty much receiving my episodes, right? And so it's going to be a lot more reach, right? So I'm really looking forward to that. Um, and sort of to just to kind of come down to earth before we kind of get into this, right? I've definitely been better. I've definitely better. I've definitely seen better days. It's been kind of tough recently for sure. I haven't been playing a lot tabletop. And also I haven't been testing a lot either. And those are very important things as part of my workflow. And so kind of rusty. And also there's just been so much controversy kind of around here, and so um, you know, kind of just wish me well. I don't generally turn on engagement, so but my email's out there, and people have used it already to reach me, so it's not like it's uncommon, and so you know, um, if you want to reach me, there's ways of doing that, right? A lot of people visit my pages through speedrun.com too, from my No More Heroes submissions, No More Heroes 3 submissions. Um, and so, I get a lot of traffic from a lot of different places on the internet. Um, you know, Again, right, my efforts in gaming are unparalleled, not to make this about me. But you know, I bleed, right? You know, um, I feel pain, right? I'm not like that, in the early days of the internet, there was this sort of like culture of people putting out like that's sort of where the website creepypasta emerged from, was because it was so popular. There's a culture of people just putting out very scary material on the internet, right? Before now you just have people just fucking putting AI shit on. Um but and so yeah, there was like this story that was went around of like this girl, that couldn't feel pain, right? Um, if people are listening, remember that kind of era. But yeah, um, you know, I bleed, I feel pain, right? I get down, you know, I have to recharge, right? I have to reflect, I have to contemplate, I have to really take time for myself, you know. Um, and so I come up here and I put up a very good persona, right? I feel like I keep my composure very well, right? Especially considering sort of what I'm up against, too. I consider a lot of very controversial figures to be mentors of mine because, you know, again, right? I come up here and I put up a persona, right? And everything seems of hunky dory, right? But, again, I like to keep my business and pleasure separate. And so, I don't really vocalize, a lot of what I go through, on the show, right? And so, you know, um, you know, I tend to try to make the shows as impersonal as possible because again, I understand the people I'm trying to reach, and I understand that people bust their ass day in and day out, right? And they don't necessarily need a heavy hand, right? And you also have to listen to what I'm saying, right? And this is cutting in to the deck profile. I definitely want to make this very you know, flowing, right? But this has been a long time coming, and I've been teasing this for a lot, and so you guys have been putting up with me, and so I don't want to necessarily just hit you over the head with a sledgehammer. Just get right into deck profile series. I know that's a very common theme with a lot of these big names in Pokemon and stuff like that, and putting out content, right? But again, they put out content, and honestly, they do it very meagerly, to be quite frank. And so, sort of to compensate for, their meager efforts, they sort of, kind of hit you over the head with a sledgehammer when you're doing, not to, point fingers and not to, sort of draw battle lines or anything like that, right? I'm just saying that, if you listen to a lot of Pokemon content, you notice that people are very much, they're very heavy handed, right? And so I come out of left field with taking a very light handed approach to delivery and stuff like that and persona. And so you know, it's not something where you can really put me in a box, right? That's why I haven't had that reach, and that's why I haven't even been attempting to have that reach, where I would be trying to really um unlike for example my older brother, right? Who is also, very much immersed in, the gaming arena as well, right? Where he can have that reach, right? However futile it may be, right? Although it's not, right? We have, a very unique opportunity to um, do a lot of damage. So yeah, our efforts are definitely not futile by any stretch of the imagination. Um, and so yeah, as opposed to someone like my older brother and then his sort of compatriots, they're able to really take a very heavy-handed approach, even despite having similar mindset, goals, etc., as I do, right? And so I definitely come out of left field when it comes to our circles, right? Because um, I take a very light-handed approach. So it seems very paradoxical when I, sort of try to, rip off the bandage, right? And then, really try to, go full circle with respect to that, right? And so, again, and this is also because, again, exposing trade secrets, stuff like that. But, you know, um, again, right, these are stuff that you have to really listen to what I'm saying, right? Again, right, this show doesn't just represent me, just, turning on my microphone and camera, and just saying what's on my mind. You know that I prepared. Excuse me. Prepared. Months in ahead just for the show alone, right? So I take pride in my work, and so it's not something where, you know, um, uh, I'm going to be moved in any way, shape, or form. Frankly, I'm just I don't have the patience for that type of stuff. Um, getting into years, right? And so it's something where um, I have to really um, you know, kind of just shake off, the shake off the proverbial dust, and strap, pick myself up by the bootstraps, right? So I don't want to get too off track, so I think I'm just gonna get started. Definitely very big introduction. So um, going to get into deck profiles. So deck we're doing first is going to be Kangaskhan EX, Mega Kangaskhan EX. So Mega Kangaskhan EX is from Mega Evolutions, Scarlet Violet Mega Evolutions, which is like essentially like Astral Radiance for the Scarlet Violet era, right? Where they're sort of introducing this side game and bringing in basically an era, right? So the first time they did this, they basically started printing a whole new line of cards, right? So it was going from Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald to Heart Gold and Soul Silver, um, or I think it was Diamond and Pearl to Heart. Yeah, yeah, it was Diamond and Pearl to Heart Gold and Soul Silver because Heart Gold and Soul Silver was Generation 4. So it was Diamond and Pearl and Platinum, and then it was going into Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Right now, they did it where now they bring in, and they did it the same thing with the Plasma series in Black and White. And then you had like Team Up um, from Sun and Moon. And then you had like Double Crisis from X and Y, right? And then Sun and Moon, you had Team Up, and then Sword and Shield, you had Astral Radiance, and Scarlet and Violet, you have Mega Evolution, right? So this is like basically like if you play like Team Fight Tactics, for example, they used to do like mid-set overhauls, right? And so this is sort of like the equivalent of a mid-set overhaul. So Mega Evolutions is sort of like the equivalent of like a mid-set overhaul for Teamfight Tactics, right? And so this card came out for Mega Evolution, right? And these were like the first three prizer Pokemon to come in to the Scarlet and Violet era, right? So you had cards like Mega Kangaskhan EX, you had Mega Absol EX, like Gardevoir EX, etc. Right? And so this card became instantly popular, um, and sort of kind of brought back this sort of spirit of, sort of these like very very oppressive control decks from like the Sword and Shield early Sword and Shield era, right? Kind of like late Sun and Moon actually, um, and these decks basically um were incredibly oppressive, right? And so sort of in the spirit of those decks, right, and how much they sort of shaped the format where sort of very aggressive players were winning, and then very methodical players started winning instead, right? Sort of similar to that was kind of like the inspiration for a lot of these the kind of these decks coming around, right? So as you can see, even with just the Pokemon alone, you can tell that this list is a lot different than what you'll get, if you go on Limitless, or if you're checking out like the Pokemon.com homepage or wherever you get like Twitter, right? Yeah, this deck's a little more. This list is a little more out of left field than, and again, if you've been watching my deck profile videos, I make a note about this, about how I'm notorious for being like the rogue deck player, right? And so, yeah, and so, um, and sort of just to get into a little bit of kind of like politics of sort of gaming around here, right? This is not going to be something where I'm blackmailing people or anything like this. I feel like this is actually really important because you know um, you don't really understand sort of the kind of inside baseball of gaming, right? Unless you're sort of very much immersed in it, right? And so it can become very strange to you, right? And very weird almost, right? And so essentially again, like what I was just saying it earlier, kind of part of this episode is that as much as we understand how spontaneous our financial situation, et cetera, can become as opposed to society, rest of society, right? We also understand that we also have to try to empathize with people as well. And so that's what keeps our goodwill up, and what makes us, be so bold, pretty much, right? And so you know, um when I was sort of just kind of making my name known um within our community here, right? Um, you know, I was very, very I was like, again, right? This is why I kind of promote this sort of persona on the show, right? Is because, when I was making my name on this in this community, I was very lighthearted, right? I was very methodical, right? Which is very important. And I was very humble. Um, I was not distracting, right? I was invisible, right? And so, recently I've been less invisible. And so it's been weighing down on me for sure. It's been weighing down on me, right? A lot of people who I consider mentors have described it, as feeling very low, right? Where you're really making an effort, and you know that, the problem is that, for example, there is only one, Rotimi Osaki, right? If you're watching on, YouTube, you probably, look at me as, like some elite guy or something like that, right? But TikTok, I go by my legal first name, which is Rotimi Osagi. So, right. And then if, you've because I'm trying to get people all over. So, speed running, of course, you would, have come to my work through, some elite guy, right? But, if I caught your attention, when I'm playing, for example, Team Fight Tactics, or if I'm playing League of Legends, right? You know me by Button Master. Pretty funny IGN I came up when I was a kid, which I'm very proud to wear now as like an internet handle. But yeah, um, but I go by Real Team Seg, right? I'm just a normal everyday guy, just like anybody else. I'm not you know, I'm not fucking Jay Uso or something like that. And so yeah. And so um again, I've been a lot less, um invisible recently. And so it's definitely been harder on me for sure. Right. Where I've been taking very bold, very risky, right, very devastating blows, um, personally. right? And in the grand scheme of things. And so, again, um, and so when it comes to really assessing stuff and stuff like that, right? Again, it's just better if you listen, right? Because I've always been trying to promote my work with the goal of, reaching a large audience, right? So I can have people help me, right? Right now, to sort of talk shop, the audience I'm trying to reach the most is the software development community, because I want to start building bridges with that community, right? I don't necessarily think that building goodwill particularly is an issue, because people in software development are, pretty much fighting similar battles than we are. And so, once I start reaching out, it's not going to be necessarily if you've proven anything. My work's out there, and you're going to see when I start asking people for stuff and stuff like that, that, I'm not to be, feared. Right. And so, again, right, when it comes to the community I'm trying to penetrate the most right now is definitely the software development community. And so, it's something where, since I've just been less invisible than I've been recently, it's definitely been a lot different, right? And a lot has changed. And so, um, you know, um, even with this series, right? Really getting into sort of, kind of how I approach the game, right? Because I would consider this, as close to how I've been trying to play, right? Even though still remaining within my style range. And so, I'm very proud of this deck, and I'm very excited for this series. And so I don't want to sort of hit you over the head, right? Because yeah, the series is gonna be really awesome. So maybe this deck profiles is even gonna take 2 episodes. Who knows? Because already about halfway done. So you know, maybe it's gonna be take 2 episodes, right? But again, right? I have to really be respectful to sort of a lot of stuff, right? And so um but I've also been doing a lot of assessing and realizing, how effective I've been, right? And so it's something where, I have to just stand back, and despite, how devastating the blows I've been taking have been, right? Almost to the point where I just want to give up, right? Cash out and just, ride off in the sunset, right? I stand back and on, I'm just like, wow, I have really, really done a very effective job, all things considered, right? Um, and so it's something where I really have to make a statement out of that, because, again, with respect to the people who I consider mentors, you know, again, um, I really, detest that people would even dare to question their intelligence, right? Especially when they're talking about very things that these are things that you can't necessarily remain bullheaded about, and so they take a lot less devastating blows, right? Than something like this, where I have to respect methodology and all that stuff, right? Whereas they have to have less respect for that stuff, and so as a result, their workflow gets interrupted a lot less, turbulently than mine would, right? And so um, I just have to stand back it up, because, again, the effort I have made, has been so effective, right? And so, um, yeah, I just wanted to sort of make that point, right? But um, you can tell, this is sort of my comfort zone. I haven't been doing deck profiles, right? Um, I've been doing a lot more educational outreach, and so, um, you know, Um, I could definitely seem a lot on edge, right? But again, I've been trying to keep the episode short and sweet, right? And I don't understand that's what we're trying to do here, right? And so, now I'm able to do that a lot more, so I'm feeling a lot more comfortable, and I'm not getting too upset. I understand that people can really just do their work and not worry about me, and that's always what I'm trying to do, right? And so, when I can't really complete that in its fullness, I can get pretty angsty, right? And so, that's just how I have to sort of just alleviate that, right? So, I think for the rest of this, I'm gonna just try to power through this, and just kind of just lay out this deck profile and sort of try to finish the deck profile, and highlight kind of the other decks we're going to be covering, right? So this list has two Kangaskhan EX, right? So that's being displayed here, right? And so um, yeah, when this deck came out, it was very popular and it was just becoming more degenerate, right? People were just making it more tanky or more annoying, right? And this list is definitely like a 50-50 list, right? A list that you would really want to play against um master mirror match, right? So I'm gonna go over the list and I'm gonna kind of go over kind of the format. This is gonna be definitely a lot more flowing. So yeah, we have this list, but I'm gonna show you like adjustments to it so you can kind of understand where I'm going with the series, right? So we just shot here real quick. So we have two Tingle here, two Tingle EX, right? I'm not gonna try to read the cards here. You should be familiar with the cards if you're watching the deck profile series. So yeah. So we have two Tingle here. And then we got the copy of Lucha. And so essentially, the issue with this deck and why this deck feels so oppressive right now is because it has the Bufflints. So the Bufflints turn the Kangaskhan's damage taken down by 60, right? And so when you have such a strong Pokemon, right? And it's also so hard to take out, right? And its attack is very efficient as well. And very random, right? Um, and then you have a lot of people playing it as well, right? It can get very frustrating to even play, let alone, deck build, etc. Right. And so um, the thing is that you know, when you have this deck and it's not really trying to beat itself too, right? And that's where you get a lot of these lists when they're playing cards like, Jumbo Ice Cream, right? Um, you know, and they're playing like 3 Bravery Charms, they're playing like 4 Bosses Orders, right? Um, and then they're playing cards like Monkey Dory too, right? And Dark Energy, right? It can get very obnoxious to even show up to play, let alone, right? And so, um, yeah, this list, I definitely just take advantage of how this deck is not really trying to beat itself, right? And also this deck has a lot more agency because it is colorless attacks, right? And so I partner it, right? Instead of, for example, with like Monkey Dory, right? I partner it with Tinglu EX, right? And I just play fighting energies, right? And then you have cards like Power Glass, right? And Fighting Gong, um, Technical Machine Turbo Energize, and Crispin, right? And you're able to basically charge up the Tinglu, right? Very efficiently, right? And Tinglu essentially what it does is it prevents them from using very strong cards, right? Like Buffalint, to sort of build a strong board, right? And then still build a board up to excellence, right? Um, and you don't really have a response, right? It's basically just a coin flip, right? And so, yeah, a lot of board states when you're playing the trading card game, because as opposed to games like League of Legends, Pokemon will still try to make the game as good as possible, right? Despite the response from the community, right? Unlike League of Legends, right? Who will very much try to bend to the community's will, right? Instead of basically trying to make as good as a game as possible, right? Which is basically the big problem with League of Legends, right? And so um, yeah, um with Tinglu, basically you're able to basically play against other Kangaskhan decks, right? In a 50-50, right? And so um yeah, that's what's really good about having the Tinglu, right? So I play 2 copies so that I don't get one prized, right? And I can also charge it 2, right? I play 6 fight energy, right? And so I'll always be able to have 2 Tinglus charged up, right? Any of the energies are prized, it doesn't matter, right? I could just attach the fight-ins, right? And I have cards like Super Rod to get fight-ins back if I don't have them in the game right yet, right? And so this list also plays Miracle Headset as an A spec, right? And so um as opposed to, you know, Precious Trolley, right, would be a very aggressive A spec, right, with these kind of like very powerful basic decks, right? I choose Miracle Headset because Miracle Headset I feel like is its time has come, right? You know, this card when it came out in Surge Sparks, right? That was, you know, Reggie Drago format, and pretty much nothing can stop Reggie Drago, right? It was pretty much Charizard, right? You had to have a really good Charizard list when nobody had. So Reggie Drago was just pretty much just wreaking havoc, right? Never seen anything like it, right? Just how much the community pretty much just, you know, threw the baby out with the bathwater and sort of just started playing Reggie Drago. There's a lot of good stuff in that format. And thinking back, you know, it's very tragic, you know, that, you know, we weren't able to, you know, um, really explore that format, which was very expansive and very interesting, right? Because you were pretty much just trying to be Reggie Drago, right? And so, now that we're able to, you know, not make that mistake again, right? Even though people are really trying to get to that again, right? You had it, and now people think you can get it again. And Pokemon is not like, you know, Riot Games, where they're just gonna bend to the community's will, right? Where, you know, cards like Monkey Dory, people have been complaining that, you know, cards like Monkey Dory are getting abused and they should get banned. And, you know, that's not because those cards are actually good, it's because everyone keeps playing them. Right? And so, you know, again, right, when everyone's just playing that card, it'll seem like it's actually strong, even though, you know, again, you got cards like Tinglu and stuff like that could just turn it off and actually fight back, right? So yeah, that's sort of just my sort of rant about the formats, right? The formats that we've been seeing recently. And so going to sort of just highlight this list, right? So, you know, we have I'll just turn on my camera so that it doesn't get distracting. So we have this list here, right? And you know, it's it's really compact, right? You know, the list is not trying to flow into anything specifically, right? Um this list can play again, right? It can play against the Kangaskhan, right? And so essentially, you know, this is the type of deck where, you know, you find it in the format, right? And, you know, this is basically what I'm trying to lay out for this whole episode, right? Is that, you know, Kangaskhan EX is the type of deck where you find it in the format, right? And you realize it pairs with so many good cards, right? And you play it a lot, right? But, you know, you realize that, you know, once people start realizing this deck is so strong, you know, they start to counter it, right? With stuff like Tinglu, for example, right? And the goal is not to play a Tinglu deck. The goal is to, you know, be able to still play Kangaskhan, right? But not make it a coin flip, right? 50-50s and coin flips are not the same, right? You know, 50-50s often get conflated with coin flips, right? And, you know, this is because, you know, um, sort of on paper, they may seem similar, right? But, you know, coin flip is sort of like a derogatory term we use in gaming to refer to a battle which is out of your control, right? Since we play mind games, we don't play, you know, tabletop games, you know. And so, you know, we have to have a lot of mental acumen, and we have to have a lot of focus, and we have to be very of sound mind, right? And so, um, you know, we have to be able to compete. Otherwise, you know, and this was just going to set this series apart from, for example, deck profiles. I mean, the exposés, because I'm going to get into a lot of sort of, you know, controversy in the format, right? And controversy in the community as well, as opposed to really just trying to, you know, give people information, right? And so, yeah, we're supposed to be able to compete. We're supposed to be able to have a good time. We're supposed to be able to go back and forth, right? And when you don't really have that ability to, right, it can get very exhausting, right, and very boring too, right, and very hopeless it can feel as well, right. And so again, I was talking about this in the last episode about it's a lot different than oh, you don't get to hear Otimi's talk this week, right? Compared to, um, people who are not necessarily playing this game full time and participating in the game full time, right? And pretty much their whole life is getting turned upside down because they're participating, right? Even though they understand the necessity of participating, right? And so it's not something where you can just be like, I'm just gonna be a piece of garbage, right? And you know, um, really trying to just ruin people's days, right? And basically try to justify, you know, um, you know, your piece of garbageness, you know, in any way you can, right? Thinking that you're sort of like outwitting your opponent somehow, which makes no sense, right? And so, you know, that's why it's important for this series. I feel like as opposed to, I feel like this year has to set itself apart from the expose because um, this series is going to get a lot more into sort of the mindset of players, right? As opposed to really just trying to highlight that, there's a lot more out there than just, what's on Limitless or Twitter, right? Or at your locals, right? So that's really what I'm trying to do here, right? So um, that's what this Tinglu enables is that now you can push a card into the active and threaten the Kangaskhan, right? And the Buffalins basically become, non-factors, right? So you have the Halucha, play one copy, right? And it puts one damage on two Pokemon, right? Bench Pokemon. So pretty much the only way they'd be able to get through this is if they have a Buffalin active, which is impossible, right? And so essentially what the solution lets you do is it lets you KO Kangaskhan as long as it doesn't have any HP modifiers, right? Like Bravery Charm or Lively Stadium, which the players are generally pretty careful to put into play. And also, right, if they're going first, if they're going second, right, they're generally the only way they have to charge up the Kangaskhan is with Turbo Energize, right? A lot of these decks are cutting Crispin, but they're realizing Crispin is not even that good, so there's not even a point of really testing with it. And they're also just not testing the format too. And so as a result, cards like Crispin become diminished, right? Because Crispin's a very good way of basically enabling a lot of the decks. But if you're playing Kangaskhan, everyone's just playing Kangaskhan, the power of Crispin goes down, right? And so you're not able to, test with Crispin and really enjoy it, right? And so people are just generally playing with Turbo Energize, and then they're just playing with a lot of boss orders, and they're just trying to get to their boss's lines as quickly as possible, right? And so um, basically, you're gonna find that people are gonna be playing very scared, right? Which is uncharacteristic, right? And so basically, they're not gonna be looking for stuff like Bravery Charm and stuff like that, and looking for Bravery Charm becomes more costly, right? Generally, these decks they draw with Festivity. That's generally their main way of drawing, right? These decks are cutting away from combos, and they're really just trying to get to bosses' lines as quickly as possible, right? Which is getting pretty obnoxious to be quite frank. And so um, basically, what we get now is sorry, I'm doing a little posture here. So let me just right, what we get here, right, is now this ability to basically, get a really, really good 50-50, right? Because, two 50-50s is not two 50-50s, right? Two 50-50s is, it goes from a 50-50 and then it goes to a 75-25, right? So that's why 50-50s are not the same as coin flips, is because, a coin flip, right, the result is heads or tails, right? Whereas with a 50-50, you can stack them and your odds can increase, right? So that's basically how, and then basically coin flips also have to really, in reference to, how nihilistic, right? And dreadful and, very just, nightmarish, those kind of scenarios can get to, right? That's sort of what the coin flip represents, right? And so, um, yeah, as opposed to 50-50, right? Now you can get 75-25s, right? Where with Ting Lu, right, you can, basically have an option where your opponent's not playing aggressively. And, you have also cards like Eerie, right? And 0-6 Machinations, right? Which can really control your opponent's board, right? I play one copy of each, right? And so when your opponent, right, is really, you know, backed against a wall, right? You know, you're able to use cards like Tinglu and Power Glass, right? And Crispin, right? And Fighting Gong, right? And Penny, right? And then having a Miracle Headset, for example, right? That you can pre-search with like Arvin, right? And then a card like Bravery Charm, Lively Stadium, beefing up your Tinglu as well, right? You're able to basically, really put your opponent on the ropes, right? So that's what I like about this Kangaskhan list, right? And so, I've been playing it, right? And I'm enjoying it. And so, um, basically, this would be a list that you'd play and you really enjoy it and you really have a good time with it. But as the format for it unfolds, you really have to be able to be on your toes, right? So that's what we're gonna be getting into with the second profile. This list has, Latias EX, right? And then it plays 3/3 just Dunsparce, right? And so, this list would be very effective for, um, really shaking up, for example, the locals, right? And once people start catching on this list, and especially with the Tinglu piece, start realizing, this deck is very good against other Kangaskhan decks. But again, right, when you're able to really threaten the board and really threaten the Kangaskhan's damage range and all that, right? You find that this deck will start to diminish, right, in terms of its returns. And so, we're gonna be covering sort of where you would sort of take playing Kangaskhan next, right? After sort of seeing the format unfold, right? So it's pretty ironic. I haven't really formatted my collection here, but I would probably do um I'd probably do Alakazam next. And so I think that's probably the deck I'm gonna cover next. And so probably gonna cover it and really lean into sort of this whole archetype and it coming back, as a full evolution line since Pokemon has been able to print Alakazam again, right? And so I think next episode will probably be about Alakazam. So um yeah, that'll be the next episode, right? And so I think that will cover this deck. I think I've covered what I've wanted to with this deck, right? If you've been playing, right, you're pretty familiar with Kangaskhan already. If you're not, unless you've been, playing by yourself or something like that. But yeah, and so don't want to sort of, beat a dead horse, right? And so yeah, I think next episode I'll cover Alakazam, right, and sort of get into probably get back into Kangaskhan a little more, right, and juxtapose that with Alakazam, and we'll really have a good time. And so, yeah, I think I'll leave it here for former part of this episode, right, and in closing, thanks for listening, right. Hope you really enjoyed this first episode. Definitely went on that longer. Hope people are really going to be able to get a lot of relief from this series, right? I've definitely been laying the hammer down, right? Even though I've really been trying to remain very lighthearted, I've definitely been laying the hammer down a lot more than I've been. And so yeah, definitely been pretty heinous for sure. Because you have to really maintain that flow, right? It's often been said that money makes the world go round, and so when you're really making as much impact and influence as we have, and we don't really have the resources right, to really back that up, right, it can get pretty heinous. And so, even though we've definitely been having a lot of impact and it's been awesome, when we're really circumventing a lot of things and still trying to do this work, and we're all trying to maintain our cool, stay cool, make sure we're not getting off course, make sure we're not doing anything too drastic, right? Really, tying up loose ends more than anything, it can get intense. And so, I hope this has been a relief. This is pretty long. It's been going on pretty long. And so, I hope you guys enjoyed. So this has been Modern Gamer Culture. This is deck profile series on Modern Gamer Culture. And so, thanks for listening, and I'll see you.